Hello, Dojo family.
Mm.
Today is the Scorpio full moon eclipse and Mercury retrograde all at once. And it is felt. And I really can't imagine a more powerful way to journey into this energy consciously and with a lot of intention than to look inward and behind us. Mercury retrograde is to rewind, is to review. And so we're actually sitting with one of my sister's allies, one of the most potent musicians, vocalists, lyricists, spoken word artists that I've ever met, doctor of Chinese medicine, Dojo council member, medicine sister, powerful oracular channel, Dr. Galya. And he is one who stands for being willing not only to review and to look at the place from which we've come, but to actually go back to the place from which we've come and the places that most of us deem untouchable when it comes to lineage work and ancestry work. And I imagine for anyone listening, if you're drawn into the dojo field, it's very likely that you've been drawn into personal development work, personal transformation work, your own personal healing. And why are most people drawn into that? There's some layers that need to be looked at, that need to be healed through, which are often the keys to our greatest gifts. And when we find the points where our deepest healing lies, the keys are most often found in our family of origin, our family systems, but then we often stop there. But what happens when we go to our ancestors, and actually review and rewind and look at the parts that have been deemed unspeakable and have yet to be healed throughout all of the lineage until now, until here in this moment? What a powerful scorpionic, be willing to look at the shadow, willing to look at that which we are afraid of, because we have the tools to do it and we're ready for it. This is what Dr. Galya represents to me. This is like, I have so much respect for this woman. I'm so excited to share with you the journey that she just took, this pilgrimage that she just went on, and more of her voice and her history and devotion to lineage work. And I haven't encountered many individuals who have gone as deeply into this work as I've witnessed in Dr. G. And so I feel really excited to bring her voice. This is actually the first conversation that we're having since she returned from Eastern Europe. And I'm going to pass the mic to Dr. G. And I would love for you to just introduce yourself and share your deepest why for saying yes to this podcast. And just give us a little context of where you just came from.
Wow. Thank you so much, Z, for that intro. I'm humbled. I'm honored. Yeah, I literally just landed a few days ago, and I spent the last 2 months traveling Eastern Europe and really connecting with my lineage and my ancestry. And my why for today of showing up in this space is, it's still very alive in me. And you may the fourth be with you. It was the kind of the energetic that I'm bringing of, I wanted your audience and myself to even have this as sort of like a memento of this moment, kind of crystalline capsule of where I'm at right now in my life, having just walked literally, I mean, we'll get into it, but some of the deepest, darkest paths, and brought my voice and brought my light and brought my gifts and planted literal seeds of wildflowers in some of the darkest places I visited to rebirth and regrow in a way that honored my truth and not the stories that I've been handed over and over and over again that are, in their own way sacred and also not in alignment with the integrity that I want to bring to my life anymore. And a lot of cord cutting, a lot of needles, a lot of song, a lot of medicine without medicine, right? Of just being so fully in a moment that it feels like you're on a full plant journey. It feels like, you know, you're in between worlds and veils are being lifted. And, you know, on one of your podcasts, you actually had a whole theme around the Burning Man
Mm,
energy, when there's just like this collective synchronistic, everything happens in this magic portal moment.
mhm,
And I had that thought actually while on this walk, wow, I feel like I've cultivated my own
mhm.
kind of synchronistic bubble where, you know, I had no phone, no Wi-Fi, like I was completely at the whim of the moment. I didn't book anything. I booked a flight there and a flight back with 2 months in between. I didn't even know where I was sleeping when I landed at the airport, and I was in full surrender to the deepest, highest, whatever timeline I was supposed to walk. And being there, fully dependent, you know, as a woman, one, in a foreign place where I don't speak the language, I don't know the culture, I don't know anything. But I know that I have me, and I
Yeah.
got me. And I brought with me the tools I thought I would need in case I felt weak, or in case I needed to remember, you know, where my strength lies. I fortified myself with my tools and my toolkit. And otherwise, I was at the whim of whatever, you know, the universe. And being there was not easy. There were challenging moments, absolutely, you know, and from the mundane to the extreme of like the train's delayed, you miss the transfer, what are you going to do? You sleep overnight in this hotel lobby in Vienna, like, you know, crazy, just going with the flow moments, to wow, angels on deck, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
angels on deck.
Yeah. You know, it's one thing to go to Burning Man where you at least you think you're gonna have fun when you decide to go, you know, and to create a flow state when you're at Burning Man. But to decide to go to the origin point of the Holocaust as a Jewish woman who has ancestors who were murdered there, and to find your touch point and to reconnect and be planting wildflowers and bringing your prayers and bringing your voice and coming
Mm,
back into that place, you know, that's a different type of courage, you know, and then to feel the type of flow and safety and life, the angels showing up for you to guide your journey the way that you did. I mean, I honor that. I celebrate that those energies of flow and expanse were so present. That tells me that, and I'm sure it told you too, that you were right where you needed to be. That's what the signal of flow state is. And it's so
yeah.
common for so many of us. We're like, yeah, I'm going to go do the thing that I'm excited about. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to go to Burning Man. I'm going to go to, you know, to Costa Rica and like be with all my friends and I get into these flow states. But to actually, I just really want to highlight the kind of woman that you are, being gone for
Mm,
2 months, knowing that it's not going to be easy, going right into the heart of the shadow, right. I just got chills everywhere, right into the heart of it.
mm,
What? Like by
mhm,
yourself.
mhm.
Okay, so let's now rewind before we even go into the happenings and the what that feel the most pertinent and ripe. And I told Dr. G, it's amazing she's like willing to come on the podcast and share today, because this is, like she said, just days off getting off the plane. And when you go through big, you know, recapturing and healing work, even after a big plant medicine ceremony, often it really makes sense that there needs to be some time to integrate, you know? And so we're really getting a fresh expression here. So we want to create that context and also know that we're trusting Dr. Galya to know what feels ready to share. And that as things ripen over time, you guys can, I'm sure we'll share her Instagram and her ways to connect with her. If you feel like you are inspired by the sharing that's happening here to do your own lineage work and you would like support with that, you could reach out to her and know that there's going to be deeper layers and things that kind of blossom in her own consciousness over time that may not be ripe and ready to share today. But thank you for trusting me and the field
Mm,
here and just the magnetism of who's attracted to listen to this episode, because of who's attracted to the dojo field, that it's being held with reverence and good
mm,
intention. And so we really invite anyone listening to like bring reverence to your listening. You know, maybe if you're doing a
mm,
million things right now, it might be nice
mm,
to slow down and listen when you have a moment to like be in a meditative state where you can really fully deeply receive.
Mm.
So just to rewind, because I know some of the ways that we started connecting initially were around just our history with the Jewish tradition, the beauty of it, and also the layers of control that can come up. And so many in my own history, I experienced a lot of control with my family around who I'm allowed to date. If you rewind it, it's so much of the fear that breeds the control specifically comes from where you just went. It comes from the othering, the racism, the the life-threatening experiences that many of our ancestors actually walked through experiences like the Holocaust. And if you're listening and you go back in your ancestry, there's many different traditions and heritages that have gone through experiences of genocide, and so we're speaking to our Jewish lineage. And I really pray that if you are not coming from a Jewish lineage, perhaps this is applicable from your own vantage. So looking at it through that lens of open-heartedness, but and also application to what's true for you. So for us, or for myself, I can speak that through experiences of my grandparents' parents being killed in the Holocaust, that created a lot of fear in my grandparents, where they would want to do anything to protect their family and keep their family safe. And of that, I understand and have compassion that there's a way of thinking that it's only safe to be with other Jewish people, because if you're not, it's your life might be on the line. And that was their actual experience with anti-Semitism. And there's my parents, their kids, right? So then they transmit, then it's a generation away, they transmit it down to my parents. And so one of my parents took that in a lot deeper than my other one. And so there was a lot more control coming through that parent than there was through the other one. So I had one side with like a lot of unconditional love, and one side with a lot of power, but also a lot of control. And that control is coming from the impact of fear that is understandable. So it's like having compassion for that. And so experiences I know that we both had of experiencing control and kind of needing to break free. There's like this experience of, at least for me, of when I'm being in the control, I had to like break free, like expel myself from that. And then what I've witnessed in you is then making the journey back home from your freedom, from your stand for who it is that you are. So maybe you could share a little bit about who it is you are, and then your experience with your family, and then where you freed yourself, and then what your journey coming back home has been like. First to your family of origin, and that's been its own magical, wild journey. After our dojo immersion, I remember you went to go visit your dad, and there was like the book from your grandmother. Yeah. So all that. So you've been having this really deep journey with your family of origin. So take us from the liberation to the back home, and then we'll go into the deeper ancestry journey.
So for those of you that don't know me yet, I grew up as an Orthodox Jew. So I grew up in a very tight-knit community where everybody dressed the same, acted the same. There's all these Netflix documentaries now, My Unorthodox Life. That was my life. I was completely immersed in this cultural field where there were expectations to follow a certain trajectory, and you're being groomed from a very young age to be that way.
Yeah.
And in high school, I'm having sit downs about becoming a mother, and what are my plans, and how am I, you're allowed to go to Israel to seminary for a year, and then you're supposed to come back and you're supposed to start preparing for marriage and pop out babies. And, my inner Leo lion was like, I need a stage. I'm going to act. I'm going to sing. I'm going to dance. And I was just immediately met with like, oh no, we don't do that here. That is not our path. You can be a teacher. You can do this. And I'm 17 years old, and I heard no, and that did not sit well with me. And so that was my first journey into removing myself from this world, of knowing that there was a deeper truth in me for a life that this world couldn't give me. And I had to slowly start making steps and a path out. That was not the norm. People don't leave the community. I don't talk to anyone that I grew up with. You know, there was a shattering that had to happen of a death of a world, but I'm also 17 and I'm looking towards this bright future that has me so lit up that I'm willing to burn whatever is in my path to get to this version of me that I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Right. And so 17 years old, dropped out of yeshiva, dropped out of high school, went to college, and that started the severing between me and my family as well. And so, you know, from the age of 17 till really like my late 20s, there was this big rift
Yeah.
between me and my family because who I was becoming was in no way in alignment with their values and morals that they were so, you know, certain marked what a good human was
Yeah.
and the codes of God, you know, and we were just, there was so much love. There was always so much love, but there was so much misunderstanding that that love was never being seen or felt because we didn't speak the same language of love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, me showing up but having to cover myself, you know, cover tattoos or cover piercings, and then, you know, meeting them in a way that made everybody else feel comfortable, but I'm dying inside. And then going to the extreme of spaciousness and not talking and having years of silence, and that being more painful than being fake. You know, it's like this whole journey into like, okay, now I'm an adult and I love you, and no matter what I say or do, this bond between us is never, it's never ending. You know, you gave me life. We are coded now forever in this way. And it's not true for everyone to continue a relationship with their parents. It is very, you know, unique and individual. Sometimes severing a relationship is what needs to happen for the highest alignment,
Mm-hmm.
and in full reverence to that truth. For me personally, I knew that, you know, my grandfather, bless his heart, would say, when it's hardest, love harder. And honestly, that was my mantra through this whole trip. Because when it was hardest, I had to love harder. When it's so easy to hate and blame and shame and be a victim, it's so much easier to take that path than to decide, okay, I'm going to get curious and I'm going to love harder
Mm.
because this person needs it the most, because
Wow.
they are triggering me so hard to push me away that I know somewhere in there is a tortured soul that needs love so much that they're so afraid of receiving it. They have to push it away because that is their survival mechanism, because they've
Mhm.
been hurt
Yeah.
so many times in the name of love, right?
Yeah.
And love can hurt, you know, it's not always it can hurt. It's part of the growth of love. Often the goodest ones hurt the mostest, you know. So I made that, you know, that choice with my family to meet them in the middle, and we had some hard talks. And you know, essentially the agreement we came to is like, we don't have to understand each other. Actually, we have to respect each other, and in that place of respect, we can nurture love
Mm.
and be stay as curious as we can and notice where we have judgment.
Mhm.
And when we're not available to be curious,
Yeah.
we have to be respectful, we have to be
Oh,
kind.
I respect it so much. And I'm reminded how parallel but different our journeys have been. For me, it was almost a decade as well of kind of having to keep to being separate from the family, but still like kind of doing our best to be in connection, but really keeping two sets of books and not able to tell them the truth of my experience because of the conditions, and it after a decade of kind of, for me, it was a lot connected to dating out of the religion. And so it was like almost like Romeo and Juliet syndrome. After a decade of Romeo and Juliet syndrome, it's kind of
Mm,
taxing. It's actually taken me a really long time to recover and like
yeah,
rebuild and remend. And so meeting
yeah.
you and hearing that you also had a similar journey and had that rupture, but then like found your way back home and put so much energy into repair
Mm,
with your blood family has been so inspiring for me. And
mm,
it's really made such a ripple of impact on me as well. And there are still deep layers that rise in the immediate blood family system. And I'm finding, like that quote you just said, when it's hardest, love harder. The gateway is acceptance, like finding really where can I just accept where everybody is,
Mm,
understand
mm,
sometimes we won't actually understand each other, but can we actually have a shared reality that it's okay, we accept that we don't understand each other, but we love each other. That's kind of where we just got to, like, it's, oh, it's okay. And there's love, right?
yes, yes,
But at least the
yes,
shared reality, because then nobody's trying to change anyone. And I think it's when
yes,
there's the energy of you need to be different or else, or you need to be different. And it's wild because there's a mirror. Because in a way, I'm also saying that you need to be different and
right,
or else. And it's like, wait a second, when all that pulls back and it's like, we are who we are how we are. We love what we love. We like what we like. We accept that because the love is bigger. Now that is easy to say in this moment while I'm not triggered and activated.
right.
But yeah, but truly, that as an aim, it's beautiful. And now I've seen you leaning deeper and deeper into that aim. So can you kind of take us back? So we had our dojo immersion, and I know there was some magic that happened after that when you went home to visit your dad. I really want to kind of track the hero's journey of kind of
Yeah,
leaving the family unit, individuating, and then now coming back home to the family unit, which I think is pretty archetypal and common, right? So
yeah.
like, let's track that through you. And then what I've seen where I want to go after that is then you kept going. Right. Okay. So take us home now. So what has
Okay.
the coming home been like?
Um, it's been, I think turning 30 was a big shift in my physiology. And coming home now is something that, it's still sticky. There's still those wounds that are still mending. And through plant medicine, through, the dojo immersion, I've been the veil of for lack of better word, like our mortality has come up to the surface, and recognizing that I don't know how much time is in our timeline. And so that shift of perspective really has changed the way I show up now with my family, where I'm really working on reverence for the time that we do get to share and making it as potent and healing and pure without avoiding big conversations that need to happen, or dropping little truth bombs if that's what
Yeah.
needs to. It's like I'm not wasting any time anymore.
Yeah.
So, and my dad is a very learned man. He studies Kabbalah, like he's very immersed in the Torah. And so, the idea of discussing theory, ideas, beliefs, emotions, all of that, he's very welcoming to those kinds of conversations, which is a gift. And I'm so grateful. And yeah, right after, we did some good work together, I had bought this siddur that I was going to gift to my father, and it had this silver plaque, and it was just this gorgeous work of art with turquoise stones engraved in it. And I flew back home to gift him this siddur, which is a prayer book for those that don't know that terminology that you use. And uh, he held this book, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's so crazy." And he pulls out these two other similar, like mirrored books with the same cover and the same everything, one medium and one small. And I had given him, it was like a set, and one was my grandmother's and one was my great grandmother's. And so it was like this full circle moment where I had like in the number 3, right? Which for me, we'll get to it, but I actually tattooed the end of my trip with another triangle, which made a Magen David on my arm in white. I don't know if you
I
can.
saw what you can. There it is.
There
Wow.
it is. Right.
Oh, gorgeous.
So the triangle is past, present, future, thoughts, words, actions, um, mind, body, spirit. And so it's this like, how do you hack timelines, and through this, the Holy Trinity, right? And so by closing with the third book, there was this massive shift in me. I was like, okay, we are closing some kind of cycle right now through prayer, through literally through prayer. And so that was right before I flew to Germany, and to literally go on a prayer walk with my ancestors. And I called it an ancestral walk because I really didn't know what else I was doing. I knew I was going to be on my feet. I had my backpack and I was going to go meet whoever wanted me to meet them, and to just stay in my Shema and in my listening. And I tattooed those words above my ear right before I left, which just means listen. And yeah, it's been ah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So just really feeling the potency. There's the coming home. And that's wild that you got the same Siddur that your grandmother and great grandmother. That's just wild. She sent me a photo, you guys. They're identical. It is
Yeah.
crazy. They're like the odds of that are there's no odds of that. So that was the entry point into this 2-month prayer walk, landing on the earth, you and your backpack with this intention. So where did you start? And now, because it's like it's sort of like there was a resolution, reconnection, landing with your family of origin. And then it was like the grandma and the great grandma, the ancestry then started calling you deeper.
Yeah.
And so then where do you go? Well, where they were from. So here you are where they were from. And can you kind of walk us through whatever feels true to share from the beginning?
Mm.
The most, potent kind of moments of like, whoa, that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I landed in Berlin,
Mm,
um, which it was the epicenter. That's where headquarters were.
yeah.
And
Holocaust.
for the Holocaust, for the German Nazis. And I didn't know where I was sleeping. So I went on my phone real quick at the airport, found a hostel, Heart of Gold. I said, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to stay. And I would take it day by day. So if I wanted to stay another day, I'd go down to the lobby. Hey, is this room available? If it wasn't, it was time to go. It was literally, I mean, I think the most I booked a room for was maybe 3 days when I knew I had a lot to cover in an area, but it was very, and then I didn't book the next thing, it was like, stay in the moment, stay present. You might need to extend, you don't know what's going to happen, who you might meet. So Berlin was Hitler's bunker. It was the Shoah Memorial, which is a massive art piece in the center of town that has different stones at various degrees. And you walk through, I have, it's such a dance for me between documenting and being in the moment, and knowing that there was going to be this convergence of a story that wanted to be told, and also honoring when is appropriate to pull this out and when is this just for me,
Mhm.
so that dance was always present with me. And I started ritual day one. Day one, I went to Hitler's bunker, and which is now it's so history. We try so hard to give it its memorial, and there's like a plaque on the wall on the sidewalk that's like, here was where the bunker was, and he was underground. And there's just apartments all around, right? And I happened to walk up as there was a tour guide. I didn't do any tours. I listened to my own tour guide.
Mhm.
And I happened to walk up to listen to the one in English also, which was a gift. And he was explaining, and as he's walking, he's like, actually, the sandbox over here, where the sandbox is technically where Hitler's body was buried when they were found in the bunker by the Russians. And so I was like, oh, that's all I needed to hear. So I walk over to this sandbox and I begin to do a full prayer ritual. And I had some resins, and I pulled out my tiny little cast iron and sat in the middle of the sandbox and started singing and started calling forth, my ancestors into the space. And yeah.
I'm like chills all over my body.
Yeah, it was day one. I didn't waste no time. I was like, okay, day one, here we are. And I say this with really deep reverence, and it's not something that I think everybody may be called to do. And I think it's something as women that we can offer if it feels in alignment and as a full yes with intention. There's also a lot that can be opened with this kind of offering. And I'll share it with your community because I feel that they will hold it in reverence. I did offer my moon blood in that space. I had a vial that I carried to several locations, actually, to concentration camps and crematoriums, which is a whole, where there were moments where there were very strict timelines that I could walk right through and I could give offerings, but I had to do it in a split second kind of moment in reverence, in prayer. And, you know, we carry so much in our blood. And the point of this journey was to honor my blood lineage and also to release from my blood what no longer serves my lineage.
Whoa.
So to pour blood, yeah. To pour blood, you know, in this place where Hitler's body was burned, felt like a full body fuck yes offering. So I did that, and I you know, I sang in Hebrew over where his body would be, and then I ho'oponopono'd in full circle at the end. On my last day of my trip, I was back in Berlin because my flight was canceled, and I went back to Hitler's bunker, and I sang again, and this time I sang ho'oponopono. Wow. Because I was in reverence of forgiveness after my journey, where it wasn't so much this like intense, like you know, you can't have my whatever anymore. I was in this calm, like, I love you. Wow. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. When it's hardest, love harder space.
Wow.
Yeah.
Girl, I need to shave my legs again because I chills so many times as you were talking. I'm wondering, I'm just asking in the moment, so whatever.
Yeah.
But, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to record just an audio of one of the prayers that you sang, whichever one feels true, and we'll add it to the end of this episode. Whichever one, it would be Ho'oponopono or one of the Hebrew prayers or any song that you feel like.
Shema was my prayer. It was I sang it all day, every day.
Through till the end, and we're gonna have wait till you hear this woman's voice, the kind of what was being spread all over energetically and frequency. And thank you. That would be amazing. So we'll add that audio to the end of this episode so we can all really receive that the frequency of those prayers and what you're standing for. Wow, the ultimate act of forgiveness, you know, like what you just kind of painted there, I think is a really healthy arc. When you first arrived, you're like, well, the energy I was in when I first arrived was kind of like, you get out of my blood, you know, like just the anger and the frustration, the purging of what is not yours to carry. And that's how, you know, when anyone experiences abuse or betrayal or violence in any way, it's a healthy response to have anger. It's a healthy response to push back. It's a healthy response to, like, that's the phase that's really important. And it sounds like on a, you know, if we kind of bird's eye view your whole walkabout for 2 months, by the time 2 months later you had come back around because you gave yourself permission to be angry, because you let yourself cry, because you were like, get out of my blood, because you held your boundaries, because of all that, there was like a softening on the on the back end that allowed you to come and make the full circle loop, which completes with forgiveness. And as we all know, the forgiveness is not just for the soul of the one who has violated you, but also for yourself. It's super powerful.
Yeah.
So that was day one. All right.
That was day one, casual day one. I was in Berlin for about 5 days. And there was a lot of synchronicity and also a lot of intensity in those first few days chapters. I really want to speak to, for a moment, as women specifically and as humans in general, the power of intuition. And I think that one of the major gold pieces for me, because I hadn't traveled in this way solo, really ever. I had gone to Europe with my sister when I was 19, and we also didn't have a plan or whatever. And it was magical and intense, but to be truly in my own and listening with my highest, and sometimes being wrong, you know, and sometimes having to deal with that repercussion of
Mhm.
making the wrong choice,
Mhm.
and sitting with that and then being like, okay, well, I trust the highest timeline. And I also then would call to my angels and my ancestors of like, okay, I actually really need you on deck right now.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Oops.
lost. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm lost.
Yeah.
And I don't have any GPS to
Yeah.
find my way. And so,
Yeah.
and then they would come. You
Mhm.
know, I'd get the 777 car going in this direction and I'd get the hit, like, follow that car. It will
Wow.
take you where you need to go, you know? And so many moments like that. So, landing in Berlin, a lot of that came up right away, being in a hostel. You know, there was a moment right off the bat where my radar went off where I was not safe, and having to handle that in a new country by myself as a woman, and then honoring myself, you know, and being like, the lobby won't let me change rooms. I'm still going to do what I need to do to feel safe in this moment. And the warrior versus the goddess versus, you know, when to pull out the tender when it's hardest love harder. And then the Kali, like, may the bridges that burn light my way, you know, like,
Feels
so
like
that,
it. Yeah.
yeah. That dance of what it is to be in my fullness of my masculine and my feminine, right? And as a female embodied, you know, person in this lifetime and representing in this world. And I had to dance. There were some, I got myself into some sticky situations being too trusting and too open. And I think part of that was also my lineage work, though. You
Mhm.
know, when I was in Germany, I went from Berlin to Düsseldorf, where my grandfather was from, which, talk about synchronistic magic. Wow. I I stayed in a hostel that night, and there was this man from Ukraine, a refugee, and a 17-year-old from Morocco studying high school in my room.
Mm.
And I burn sage, you know, and I'm
Mhm.
clearing the space. They're like, "Wow, great! It smells so good. Thank you." I'm like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
good. I'm glad you like it."
Yeah.
'Cause I gotta clear my sleeping space. I don't know who's been here.
Uh-huh.
And that morning, I get up to go to this Holocaust museum that's in the center of Düsseldorf. And this man from Ukraine pops up as soon as I wake up, and he follows me outside and he's like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "I'm going to this Holocaust museum." He's like, "Can I come with you?" And I was like, "It's kind of intense. Like, do you want to come with me?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to take that on?" He's like,
Yeah.
"Well, I have nothing else to do." And I was like,
Wow.
"Okay." He's like, "Well, I have a car." And I'm like, "Okay, great." Cause it was going to take me, you know, all this public transport. And he was like, "Yeah, I have a car." And then he takes me there. And as we're walking up, he's like, "I just want to be sensitive. Like, if this is something you need to do alone, I'm not trying to intrude on
I
your
like that.
day." Yeah, it was very, I like that too. And I was like, you know what? You're a sovereign being. I'm a sovereign being. I really appreciate you saying that. I am going to be in my own space inside. And if you feel called to be here, then absolutely, like, you know, follow your truth. So we go inside. 5 minutes in, he's like, "I gotta go. I didn't eat breakfast. This is too intense. It's all this listening and reading. I need to go eat something." And I was
Wow.
like, "Respect, brother. Like, go
Yeah.
do you."
Thanks for the ride.
Thank literally,
Yeah.
mama,
Yeah.
because 2 minutes after he leaves, literally, I turn the corner of this museum and I see my grandfather's picture on the wall as a young boy. And I'm like, "What? That's my what?" And as I'm realizing that that's my grandfather, this man and the front desk girl are walking right behind me. And I turn and I'm like, "This is my grandfather." And the man is like, "Really? No way." And I was like, I know, right? I didn't know he was in this museum." And then he was like, "I work at the archive. I'm only here. She's new here and I have to cover her lunch. But if you wait 30 minutes, I can take you to the archive. We have all this information on him." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Here, why don't you listen to the interview while you wait?" And then he pushes on the computer. He's like, "Oh, thank God it's working. They've been broken all morning." And then I hear my grandfather's voice telling his story of how he survived the Holocaust being projected on this screen with drawings he made as a little boy. And I'm in this complete state of like, I haven't heard my grandfather's voice. One, he died when I was 17. So to just be in his presence, like so fully listening to him tell the story as I'm on my ancestor walk to honor his lineage in the town and city that he grew up in. Yeah. So this
Whoa.
is, yeah, Düsseldorf. And I'm looking and I'm listening, and then I'm having this whole moment with my grandfather. And then the man takes me to the archive, and we go in the back. He's like, so this is crazy, but the woman who interviewed your grandfather, who retired 13 years ago, is here today looking for pictures for another story she's working on. And she said she would love to meet you. And I'm like, okay, God. I go in to meet this woman, and she's like, her name is Angela. Angel is in her name. I'm like, hi, Angela. She's like, oh, Ernie Lowenstein. I remember Ernie Lowenstein. And telling me about my grandfather and pulling out papers and a book from 1892 with my great grandmother's name written on it that went through the concentration camps, through the Holocaust, that I am named after this woman. And she pulls, it's falling apart. I mean, the paper is like thin, and she hands me this prayer book. And I'm like, in like, that's just like how I'm just like, I have no words, you know?
Uh-huh.
And she's like, she looks at the man. She doesn't work there anymore. And she's like, I'm like, do you think it's possible? And she looks at the man. She's like, I think if a family member wants to reclaim an item from the archive, we should maybe bring it up to the board. And I think families should always have first right to anything in the archive that they may want. And she looks at the guy, and he's like, yeah, I can, we have a board meeting on Monday. I can bring that up on Monday. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you're going to give me this? I get to take this with me? And she was like, I hope so. I will vouch for you. And I'm like,
Oh
this
my
is amazing.
God.
It gets better. She's like, have you been to the art museum? I'm like, no, why would I go to the art museum? She's like, your grandfather's art is featured in there from when he was a child. I'm like, what? So then she takes me to the art museum personally, speaking in German because I speak no, and she gets the director's name, emails, gives me the email, tells me to email him. She said he's going to open the archive for me to go see these these paintings that my grandfather made when he was 11 years old, right before he left Germany to go hide in France during the war. Crazy, these pieces of my grandfather, like tangible of my lineage, of my grandmother, my grandfather, right? And then
Yeah.
this woman, Angela, she said, where are you staying? And I'm like, I'm staying at this hostel. And she said, come stay with me for a few days. I would love if you stayed with me. And I end up going back to the hostel to get my things. This man, my angel who drove me there, all his stuff is gone. He's completely removed from this hostel. And I'm like, I texted him like, what happened? Where'd you go? And he said, yeah, I moved hostels. Take care. Have a great, enjoy your journey. And I just talk about timing, right? Had he not taken me to then be in alignment with the archive man that walked by at that very moment, to then walk to, because she was leaving. She was Angela was wrapping her stuff
Yeah,
up.
you
And
wouldn't have gotten there in time. Oh my God. That is wild.
I know. It was like I
So
pinched
do
me.
you have the prayer book?
I do have I went back on Monday. That's why, I couldn't plan things ahead, because things like that would happen where it was like Friday and then everybody's out of the office. And so I have to wait till Monday to get this book. But then Angela shows up and she says, come stay with me. Come stay with me, a village outside of town. And, these surrenderings to like, well, I only wanted to stay in Düsseldorf to do this thing. You can't
Yeah.
like be rigid
Yeah.
because you don't know what's going to
Right.
show up in the field. Right.
Totally.
So I ended up staying with her, and then starting my moon as soon as I entered her apartment, which was like a whole interesting moment for me too. And her telling me about my grandfather, having a woman that knew. Here I am in this strange city I've never been in before, to meet the one person who knew my grandfather, like
Yeah.
had a personal relationship with him, flew to see him 3 different times to get his full story, to put it in the museum, is inviting me into her home, and I'm like, okay, grandpa, I see you. I feel you. You are guiding me.
Organizing this. Yeah. Oh yeah. Bless the potency in that line. Their granddaughter is flying across the world by herself. Yeah, they're covering some bases. Wow. I am blown away. Okay. So now keep going. Keep going. We've got like a bit longer on the.
Okay. I mean, that was Düsseldorf. My grandfather escaped to Paris. So I went there and I went to I got his exact addresses. I was going into archives, every Jewish history museum of the Holocaust. I would go and look for any information on my ancestry. I would find names amongst millions of names, and it would be like Lovenstein, Lovenstein, Lovenstein. And those names would follow me around every country I would go. It would be the same, some of the same names would pop up, and I would know, okay, these are my ancestors. Like these are
Yeah.
the ones that want me to know their names.
Mm.
And I am now doing that work of calling each person by their name. Like, okay,
Wow.
Rosa, okay, Ernst, okay, Ludwig, okay, Otto, I hear you, I see you, I now know your name. You're telling
Wow.
me your name, and call each thing by its right name, right? And so the power of naming an ancestor, and no, I've never met you, but you want me to know you. And having access to them in that way is really it's changing the whole way that I relate, to this idea of calling in the ancestors. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, some of them now are giving me their name, and
Yeah.
I wonder how many more names, could
Yeah.
I am I supposed to carry, am I supposed to
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And yeah, how can I honor them more deeply? And Paris was really intense. There was a lot going on politically at the time, so that energy, feeling the people rioting, there were strikes, there was this backlash of energy from the people. It was also the most intense energy I received personally in my interactions, where I had to call on a lot of Kali energy within myself to stay safe. Um, and then I had kind of a bookmark between my dad's side. So I'm the byproduct of both grandparents are survivors of the war. So I had my dad's lineage, and then I had my mom's lineage. So I bookmark, I did Berlin, Dusseldorf, Paris, honoring my grandfather. And then I went to both the concentration camps that my grandfather's parents were in, which was Gurs and Marseille, at a factory. So I went into those. I had her prayer book now. And I went to Gurs concentration camp, which was a whole nother magical story, because these concentration camps are in the middle of nowhere.
Mm.
It's like, how do we get away with mass murder and not create a massive scene? Is like, they're not like on the road casually,
Yeah.
they were kind of far off, some of them. And so Gurs specifically had no buses, no trains. And on top of it, it's in France, and there's strikes going on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I somehow decide to stay in this tiny little town called Po. And I email the Chabad rabbi of that town, because there happens to be one. And I say, hi, I'm doing an ancestor walk. I'm here to honor my lineage that survived the Holocaust. I know my grandmother was in this camp. Do you know anyone who might be driving there in the next few days that could give me a ride? He emails me back the president of the camp, his information. He said, call him, he'll know somebody. So I call him, and I'm like, hi, I'm on this walk, la, la, la. And he writes me back right away, I will personally pick you up on Sunday, and I will take you there myself.
Oh, wow. Chills again. Wow.
Right. And I was like, thank you. And he was like, absolutely. To honor your lineage, you should go and see, and he said, I already found 2 names in the cemetery with your last name on it. And he was like, so I don't know if you know who they are. And I was like, well, they're introducing themselves to me left and right. So I'm here to honor all of them. And I know my grandmother was here. And so to walk, they kept the main road in and out of the camp intact, where it was a massive camp, one of the biggest ones that they had. It was a work camp. And eventually they ended up sending most of them to Auschwitz and draining the camp towards the end. But in Gors, the main road was still intact, and I had her prayer book, and I had a little vial of my blood, and I was like, my blood has walked this exact road. Like, she literally walked this exact road to enter into this camp, and now I get to walk it in prayer and song, holding her book of prayer. That was like a high moment for me of really feeling on purpose, of this. There was, you can go visit the camps and you can visit the things, but there was this like really direct portal of that moment of being fully on purpose and fully in alignment with my particular lineage, knowing that they had walked on this very earth, and that I was getting to almost like, it was like a rewind, play, repeat kind of ha- feeling her looking at me, watching me be there, because who would go back? Why would you go? So many people don't want to face their
This
trauma,
is the yes, this is your medicine.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And here I am in the like feeling, holding her very artifact that by the grace of God was given to me before
Yeah.
I got to her camp, that she kept throughout that camp. And I get to just sit and give my blood and pray and just be like, I see you and I'm here because of you and because of your resilience and because of your prayers and your faith and your trust in yourself to make it through this. I get to come here now in reverence and walk this very road with you, holding your prayer book, to say thank you for all that you did so I could be here with you. Wow. That was a gift. And to be chauffeured, literally chauffeured by the man who was the president, honoring this land. That was definitely a massive moment for me. And Auschwitz, going to Auschwitz, that was some deep, I would say, Auschwitz and then Hitler's mansion, which was sort of the where I felt this precipice shifting of that alchemy into when it's hardest, love harder.
Yeah.
That was where I really felt, um, Auschwitz was very intense. It was the entire sky was a yin yang. Over the camp, clouds, rain, darkness. To the left, sunshine, bright blue sky. And I have pictures of the sky. I'm like, I can't believe what I'm looking. It's literally a yin yang above me of shadow and light, and pouring torrential downpours, and then giving me the water I needed to plant my seeds of wildflowers, of paper with prayers for alchemy, of prayers for healing for everyone who was on this land, to be getting the rain that then let me plant my seed, at these, it was like, yeah, girl, it was, I still feel humbled and in such like woe is like, why me almost energy of like, how could I have known that every step of my journey up until this point in my life was going to take me to this place where I was going to be doing this kind of work? If you would have told me 10 years ago, that this is the work you're going to be doing, I wouldn't have believed you. And I always felt like 33 was going to be this really pivotal year where I was going to birth something. I thought it would be a baby, but life said, ha, but it was something was birthing. And I say that because I went from that experience of Auschwitz and feeling, the depth of what the Holocaust was, of what the ultimate end goal of that experience culminated into in a tangible witnessing. And there's two camps. There's Auschwitz 1 and there's Auschwitz 2. There's two different camps because it got too big. And so I spent, 10 hours in prayer walking between these camps, doing rituals in between people walking around, like trying to find my little nook so I could burn palo, I could give tobacco, I could give a prayer, like finding ways to bring my medicine into these places where, it's not that easy actually. There's tour groups and all kids in high schools, like, all these interesting energies. And
Yeah.
on Passover, on the full moon, I went to this tiny mountain town, Berchtesgaden in Germany. And I had this idea I was going to go up to the Eagle's Nest, which was built specifically for Hitler to overlook the mountains. And it's this epic building that's closed during winter. And I go up to, fancy hotel in the middle. This is the only thing I could find. I was like, okay, I'm going to get this hotel room and I'm going to go do this work and I'm going to hike up to this Eagle's Nest. And so I check in and I ask the front desk, how do I get up here? Are there trails? And he looks at me and he's like, there are, but you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, no one's going to tell me no. I was like, why not? And he's like, many experienced hikers have hiked that trail and we still haven't found their bodies. And I'm like, he's like, it's like an Everest up there. And I was like, okay. And then he says the piece I really need to hear, because my inner rebel has been out this whole trip, you know? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'll be the one that makes it. And
Yeah.
he's like,
Totally.
you know, and he pulls out a map and he goes, besides, Hitler was afraid of heights. He rarely spent any time there. His mansion, though, was right here. And he points on the map. And he's like, it's mostly destroyed from the British during the air raids, but there's still a wall that remains. And it's in this area.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, thank you. That's
Yeah.
all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Redirect. Like, this is not how I die. Okay.
Ancestors.
They were like, girl, don't you dare try to hike that mountain. You don't even, it's like icy, snow covered. Like, I don't know. I have like no
But you would
gear.
have. But
I
you
would
believe in this so much, you would really risk everything for it, which is really a powerful thing to arrive into when it comes to your design. And I'm so excited for the ripples of impact that this is going to make in terms of what you do with this energy moving forward and in service and in support of others. Because when we click into our design so deeply that we would literally lay it all on the line for it, there isn't a question. It's just, that's what it is. It's one of the most profound arrivals, I think, as a human being, when you're getting that much synchronicity and affirmation and support. And thank goodness, blessed, it turns out you didn't need to go out that way. But it's just, you know, there is something really powerful and beautiful of the place that you're coming from. And I can really feel that.
Yeah. It was, you know, there was the inner teenager, right? You talked about how we left origin family. I went back to that place where there was this like this line in the sand and an entitlement that came over me, specifically in Germany, around what is owed to me for my ancestors. And I had to really walk this integrity line within myself of like, well, y'all took all our shit, so I want this apple. Sue me, you know? And it was like the inner rebel. I was like, girl, is that really who you are? You know? And it was like, well, fuck you too, you know? And I had to really dance with what is the point of this? And where is the alchemy? And what is righteous and true? And where is my inner rebel coming to play? And is she just acting out to act out? Or is there, you know, what's the
Is
root?
this serving?
Yeah. So that was a fascinating journey to be on in and of itself.
Totally.
And then to get to this pivotal point where, you know, okay, I had been to the bunker, but that's where he died. Now I'm at the place where he lived, right? Where he spent a third of the war hiding and plotting. This is where Auschwitz came to be. From this location is where he spent a majority of the time when he wasn't moving around. It was here in this mansion. And I asked for the land, the ancestors of that land, and for my ancestors to cloak me in protection so I could do a ritual, because it was on this trail, this hiking trail, and there's just this massive wall. And I've never seen magic work so hard as I did in that moment, because mama, people would walk and nobody came close to the wall. Nobody crossed my boundary. I drew a line amongst the trees and I was like, protect me. I have to do this work. And I leaned my back on the wall, my spine touching every bit of this wall that was his house. And I used my tuning fork and I did all these points on my meridians, and including spleen 4, which is the Chong Mai, which connects us to our ancestors through our lineage, through our blood. And I'm singing Shaman, shaking a shaky egg with the other one and hitting the tuning fork and doing my
all the tools.
All the tools, girl. I have my little cauldron with my resins going in front of me to clear the space, and every single chakra I clear, and I do these specific points on my channels that I feel called to do, and kidney channel and spleen channel, and you know, all these medicinal points, and then I hold it and I can feel the vibration of the cells in my body recalibrating as I'm leaning against this wall, you know, and I'm like, clear this. This is what we're clearing. His energy, wherever it touched, anywhere in us with a story, a belief, a fear, whatever, an ideology, we're clearing it now. This is where it ends. And as soon and, and I had taken, with permission, you know, I had little mementos from different camps, a nail here, a rock there, and I had all these pieces on my altar in front of me of like, not only are we clearing it from my timeline, I'm clearing it from any timeline that I am touching with these artifacts here. I'm doing for myself and for anyone else that wants to piggyback on this right now. I'm not your antenna to carry your story, but I am your antenna to clear whatever needs to clear right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, just holding this vibration. And then I had this friend that I had met in Maui that I didn't know lived on the other side of this mountain. And she's staying there with her, she's German, with her German family. And I go from doing this treatment to taking a train to this family's house, that I come to find out her grandfather was a Nazi prison guard in a prison camp, worked for the Nazis. He was a full-time soldier his whole career, World War I, World War II. And I'm in this German family house.
Wow.
And I sleeping in this bed that her mother slept in, and my body goes into a full energetic labor. And I don't know how else to describe it, Mama. It was insane. Like, I've never felt pain like this in my life. It was coming down my spine, into my rectum, into my hips, into my womb, and I was having full on contractions. I'm in fetal, like full cat cow pose. I'm moving my hips. It's coming in waves. And I know that there's no baby. So I'm literally in this process of birthing death, because as I'm sitting there in excruciating pain, every museum, every Holocaust memorial, every concentration, every face on every wall that I had seen is flashing before my eyes. And I'm groaning and I'm growling and I'm giving all of my chi to birth death, essentially, and to honor the dying of what was, to create this new portal in my womb space of what will be. You know, it was like, oh, cute. You thought you could do a little tuning fork and that'd be it? Like, nah, girl, you need to clear this from your body. And that was the turning point for me. That was the most humbling, excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. Also, can we take a moment to honor our mothers and the pain that they go through to bring life into this world? We do not talk about that enough. I have a whole new respect for women.
Yeah.
I already respect was, but then to get a taste of what that experience might feel like, and that took me out for days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was no baby, so you know, you don't get the endorphin high that
Yeah.
mamas get, where they're like, I would do it all over again, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, these women,
And this
wow.
woman who went through that and didn't get that endorphin high and went through the full passage of the honoring of all those who have been lost, with all the resistances and all of the terrors that have gone unprocessed, to process that through your system and through your lineage. I'm going through a process. I just want to be transparent with everybody. This happens with us, with Dr. G, with me, for as a Jewish woman, with my own history of trauma through the lineage, witnessing you. I said this in the beginning before I heard this expression, all of the stories. Like I said, this is our first communication since she's been back. So I'm affirming that the work that you're doing is ringing the bell, is creating expulsion, expression, processing, is doing what it's meant to do. I have not, on any other podcast that I've done so far, had chills as often as I have throughout this episode. Like, there's something real and very deep that's being moved through the willingness and the work that you're doing. And that's being affirmed in so many directions through the synchronicities and support that you've had throughout all of this work. And now here's another direction where I'm like, wow, you're sharing. Thank you. I thanked you in the beginning. I'm thanking you again for the courage and willingness to share with me and with all of us here in this field what you're moving through. And I imagine anyone listening who has Jewish heritage and lineage, or anyone listening who has trauma in their lineage, might be receiving some significant activation. However that looks, it's going to be different for everybody through this. And I don't know what it looks like for me, but there's a lot moving. So, whoa. So honoring you. So fuck yes,
Mm.
honoring all the mothers, but and honoring you,
Mm.
what you just did and what you were willing to do and the way that you're moving through and how much
Mm.
prayer and intention and ritual you brought to each of these experiences. And so hearing you here, as we start to kind of land the ship of the episode, I know I'm going to be integrating as you're integrating, right? So I'm just tracking, here you are in the home of this German
Yeah.
family, literally like the labor of the
Yeah.
unprocessed emotional, energetic, physiological, spiritual, psycho-spiritual content that's being moved through you for your own and all those around you. And you named that as a turning point. So can you speak into just like what feels like at least for now, like I said, I think there's a lot more that's going to keep surfacing as you integrate,
Yeah.
but what's the takeaway? So that was a turning point. And then in this, last chapter of your journey, can you kind of give us the high level of what turned after that? And, how would you like to close it in terms of what you're kind of taking away and walking with right now in your own integration?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I think that was a turning point for a couple of reasons. One is because, sometimes I was having very visceral, spiritual, emotional growth in moments. But when you bring in the pain body, when you really get into the DNA that's storing the actual suffering, and then feeling pain is so humbling and such a reminder of my mortality and my humanity and how I also have my limits, right? And then being in that space of extreme pain, knowing that I had walked during hailstorms and snowstorms wearing full down jackets and still being freezing on these paths that I knew my ancestors were in pajamas, working on these camps, to then feel visceral pain in such a way that I felt like it drew this bridge of connection where I had intellectually understood and even emotionally understood and spiritually been in reverence, but then meeting it with my physical, it was like, okay, the bridge has now been solidified of the depth of
Mhm.
suffering, because it wasn't just mental or emotional or spiritual, it was actually physical in the extremes, right? And I think that is what brought it home into my soma, was having that physical release and also that tenderness around my own physicality, and then having to take time to recalibrate from there. I actually, so being in the German house, doing that healing, the next day I did a treatment on the mother, and to then offer healing to a German family, having just gone through a death portal myself, to then give to this, I felt like, what better alchemy of this history than to show up in service as a healer when it's hardest love harder. That's where I started to find that inner compass of, we are not what happened to us. We are not the story. We are not victims. We can be helpers. We can actually show up right now.
I saw you doing a
and
TED
and
talk.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right? And so here's this woman, this older woman, who is in pain and suffering from fear, debilitating anxiety over the death of her children that hasn't even happened, that she's so afraid of, which is the mirroring of what I'm doing that did happen. People's children did die,
Yeah.
And so here I am in this mirroring with this German woman, and I'm like, I'm going to give you a treatment. I'm going to bring my needles out for you now. I'm going to help you work through this anxiety and this fear story. And her ancestors came into the treatment. Her grandmother showed up in the space, right? And I come to find out her grandmother died giving birth to her mother. And I'm in her bedroom giving birth to death. And here was this perfect mirroring of life, death, symbology, yin and yang meeting in this alchemy of, whoa. And I had this like, oh my God, I'm sleeping in the room that this woman used to sleep in. And having this death portal experience to the next day, giving her a treatment where her grandmother comes in with anger and rage and envy. And she's like, I'm so uncomfortable. I feel my grandmother here and she's not happy. And I was like, oh my God, here I am in reverence to the mothers. This woman never got to be a mother. She literally gave her life for life. I'd be pissed too if I never got to hold my baby. And here you are living with your baby, getting to have this moment with your family, right? So here I am in this alchemy of understanding what life even means, to give your own life, to produce life. And then it was actually kind of intense for me to stay there. So I cut my journey short and I went to Portugal to go to the ocean. Yeah. And when I got to Portugal, my great aunt emails me that my family took a Portuguese ship from Europe to New York. And Portugal was actually the saving ship that brought them to safety. And so I didn't know that. I just felt the pull to Portugal because I needed the Mediterranean Ocean. And I knew that I needed something to cleanse my body. And so I, for 3 days, took a train, back-to-back trains to get to Portugal. And I landed and I dunked my body in this water. And then my aunt's like, Portugal was the neutral space. They actually came, and a lot of Jews hid there and were rescued in Portugal. And we took a Portuguese ship to New York, which is where, full circle, right? I started my journey. And that was the last kind of ending of my trip, because then I had left some stuff. I left my backpack at this house because I couldn't carry it because my back was so tender. I just took a tiny bag to Portugal. I was like, I'll come back for my shit. And I went to the house, I closed that circuit, and I said, okay, I've healed. Like I honor this, and I'm done here. And then I went to Amsterdam to meet my youngest sibling on 4/20, which is Hitler's birthday. And I celebrated life with my youngest sibling in Amsterdam, which was like the ending of this beautiful kind of like, now we get to celebrate life because we're alive. And then I got this, the white to represent the healing work that I had.
Scoot this way. Yeah, there
you
go.
Okay, so there's the white triangle on top of the black, the yin yang. And then me and my sibling got matching tattoos, which in Hebrew says lizkor lizrom, which I'm terrible at this. Okay, here we go. Lizkor lizrom. And it's connecting to my needles that I have on my elbow, which is my armor, and which lizkor is to remember, like, which was even in Amsterdam, the memorial for all the names of the Holocaust was called lizkor, lizachor, to remember, in memory of, in memoriam. And so we got lizkor, remember, lizrom, to flow like water, because both our names mean water. Galya means the wave of God, ocean wave. Mayim is my sibling, which literally means water. And remember to flow was the whole thing of this journey, was like, you are water, flow like the waves, and they will be high and they will be low and everything in between. And then my flight got canceled, which gave me that last extra day in Berlin, thank the goddess, so I could have that moment with Hitler's bunker where his life ended, where I got to end my trip now in this other space of complete, like, okay, full circle, we did it. Like, from start to finish, we fucking did it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy wow.
Holy wow.
Oh my goodness. If y'all are listening only on audio, you can look on YouTube as well if you want to see the tattoos. And we're going to add the Shema, the prayer, the audio of Dr. Galya singing that prayer that she dusted all the lands with in many pivotal moments of this journey. And I'm personally really excited to hear it myself again. And listening to just the frequency that you put down, whether you're speaking, as you all can feel through this podcast transmission, or speaking or writing poetry or singing. We've had the gift. Dr. Galya is one of the incredible fucking women. I'm blown away by these women that are part of the Dojo Council. And we've had the gift of getting to journey together in many a deep way and receiving the just transmission of your voice in all of its forms, and the way that transmission coming through you can really shift some energy for others and for myself as well. So I feel really excited, having experienced firsthand my own really deep impact from receiving the power of your voice. For everyone, after having received this transmission and this journey, I encourage you to just stay for just a few more minutes and really create some space to land and open your heart, and then receive the transmission of her voice with the Shema, and just let whatever rises rise. So,
Mm,
wow, Dr. Galya,
mm,
thank you. What a beautiful,
thank
beautiful,
you.
powerful, deep journey.
Mm,
I will definitely be listening to this episode again. I'm going to send this episode to my family, to loved ones, and just
mm,
feeling the potency and power and impact of what you just did. And thank you for doing what the work that you do, and living in your design and all of its surprising expressions. Like, if I think it's kind of cool that 10 years ago, if the version of us 10 years ago looked at what we were both doing now, it'd be like, what? But really, it's like, wow, that wouldn't be doing anything else. And like the vibrancy I can feel in you after the
Mm,
depth of affirmation that has just happened, in the way that life and your ancestors showed up in support of the work that you've chosen, or that has chosen you, is irreplaceable. It's such a
mm,
precious vibrancy. Doesn't mean it's good or it's bad or it's easy or it's hard. It just means there's an aliveness. And I
mm,
really feel that aliveness coursing through you and your expression here. So thank you for
mm,
bringing it all, the aliveness that comes after being willing to touch death, to us here.
mm.
Perfectly timed on the Scorpio full moon, which when we release this, it'll be a couple weeks after, but the energy will still be very much alive. So it's really good timing. And I'd love for you to share if there's ways that anybody impacted by this episode can reach you. Let us
Oh,
know.
sure.
Where can they find you?
You can find me on IG. I am Dr. underscore Galya, Galya.
Mhm.
My email, if that is of preference, is spirithealersnp for nonprofit @gmail.com.
Mhm.
And I mean, you can always text me, I guess, too,
Mhm.
if that feels in the
Well,
highest alignment with
email her
reverence
email her
first.
first, and then if she feels inspired to give you her phone number, she will. Yeah.
Thanks, Mama.
Yeah.
She's like, boundary.
Yeah, boundaries first. Um, but yeah,
Word.
I want to say she is an incredible Dr. Galya is an incredible doctor of Chinese medicine. So if you're called towards, deep work on a physical level, body work, acupuncture, and also just really excited for more of your facilitation and your artistry to come out in the world. So there's going to be a lot. She'll be popping out. So definitely give her a follow and reach out if you want to go deeper. And
Yes.
to all of you listening, thank you for the depth of your receiving. As always, these episodes and the places we go are really only possible because of the trust in both directions that is present here. And I really trust that those of you who show up to listen are listening at a depth that is really reverent and honoring. So thank you. And with that, I look forward to seeing you next time.